Welcome to Philosophy 102, Introduction to Philosophy, Great Thinkers. I will be your instructor throughout this course, Dr. Justin Davis. And the goal of this class, the way I see it, is to introduce you to philosophy. It's to introduce you to really great thinkers, as the title implies. But really beyond this, I'm not expecting that you know everything while we encounter this class. My goal in this class, as it is in many of my classes, especially introduction levels, is that you begin to make connections. As we talk about different great thinkers throughout history, what I want from you is to be able to see where one idea impacts another, and how ideas move and grow and change, and how the ideas that have been introduced already before us help lay the groundwork for how we encounter new ideas and how we approach the world. So, while we're going to cover a lot of people and a lot of material and a lot of great ideas from great thinkers, really what I want you to focus on in my course is this idea of making connections. How does one idea help you understand who you are and what you want to be in your life going forward? You've joined a philosophy class. Congratulations. Now, what is that? You'll probably have people ask you, what is it you guys are doing, or what is it you're learning? Or maybe we can even ask, what is philosophy? And to understand, we probably should look at what the word actually is. And not just necessarily what it is in its sort of classical construction, but what it is also for us today. The word philosophy has got two Greek words nestled up next to each other. The second is the word Sophie. You get different versions of this, but largely the word means wisdom. So what we're going to do in a philosophy class is philo wisdom. So what's philo? Well, classically, Greek has got three, and it actually has a few more, but three major expressions of the word love. There's eros, there's philo, and there's agape. And the easiest way to understand these three is to understand their relation with the object to which they're discussing. The problem is that in English we have the word love and it could mean any host of ideas, but we all know that if I say that I love my wife and I love my car and I love pizza and I love my friends, that isn't the same. That there's a different relationship between all of those. Anyone who says that they love their wife and their friends, and that means the same as I love pizza, we would say you either have an overestimation of pizza or you have an underrepresentation of both what a friend is and a spouse or children or something else along those lines. Typically speaking, when we use the term eros for the Greek love, that is kind of how we would do for loving of pizza. We actually will end up getting the word erotic out of it, but that's not really the aim of the word. Eros means I love something mainly because of what I'm getting from it. When I eros something, it sacrifices itself for me. And so we can maybe see how eroticism kind of falls into that, because really the object is just an object of desire that you then want to consume and bring within yourself. But we can also see how this works for most commonplace items like food, right? When you love pizza, pizza gives itself entirely of you, and you give nothing for it. I mean, there might be a cost involved, but you're not really doing that in some sort of notion of love for the pizza. It's just an exchange. On the other end of that, you end up getting the word agape. And agape is typically understood as a sort of motherly love. This is a love where the one side gives everything to the other, but unlike Eros, where the object is the one that's getting devoured, in agape, it is the lover that is getting devoured or goes away in their relation to the beloved. And so this is oftentimes how people will talk about loving their children or their spouse or something else along those lines. We would say that this is a selfless love, right? Why is it your parents, didn't just ship you off or get rid of you? It's because they love you, even though you cost them things. You cost them a lot, right? Financially, kids are expensive. but yet that is seen as a worthwhile sacrifice because of the love you have as a parent for that child. Now, notice that when we're talking about our love of wisdom, we aren't talking about either eros or agape. You're no longer consuming all of wisdom, nor are you giving everything to the sort of threshold of wisdom. You're not sitting at the footstool of wisdom and giving everything that you are. Rather, when we're talking about philosophy, it's the word philo. Philo is where we'll get like the word Philadelphia comes from, right? The city of brotherly love. Philo is a love amongst equals. And for most of your classic Greeks, this was actually understood as the highest form of love. This also runs into all sorts of other interesting tangents that we're not going to get into here. But this also means that when you're loving wisdom, you must give something of yourself to wisdom. And wisdom must give of itself something to you. There's a mutual exchange. And the two who are different are made equal in this. And it's hard for us because we don't necessarily have the idea of wisdom being something that's personified, but this is exactly what it is we're trying to do in a philosophy class. We're trying to engage with wisdom, something that's different from us and outside of us, in a way that then has value taking from us and something that we get for as well. Hopefully, throughout this class, you're not only giving of your time and your mental energy and you know all sorts of other things that you're doing for this class, but you're also getting something out of it. The idea is that while some of these are big ideas that we're talking about with these great thinkers, you're also gaining from it. You're able to approach the world in a new and better way. You're able to approach other people from perspectives you couldn't beforehand. This is part of what the aim of this class is, and this is what we're hoping to do going forward. To that end, there's a handful of different places you're going to be reading regular. One, you need to get the book Philosophical Fragments, Johannes Climacus by Soren Kierkegaard. I highly recommend the Hong translation. That's what I'm reading out of. If you ever hear page numbers or it's over here on a paragraph, this is the one to do that. There are a few other translations out there, but this is kind of the standard and has been for a very long time. There are some newer translations coming out of different Kierkegaard works, some of which are definitely worth engaging with and reading, but this happens to be the sort of standard that has been used. In addition to that, there are readers. I've broken it down to the weekly modules that you will end up seeing. Every single one of those will end up having the reading for that. I try to limit the total number of pages in those readings so that way it doesn't overload you or overwhelm you. It's roughly 20 pages a week of reading outside of philosophical fragments, which is not too much as you're going to go through. It's best if you're doing this on the weekly basis to kind of think of this as one half versus the other half. And sometimes it's a little less, and sometimes maybe it's a tad bit more than that. But I'm trying to keep it roughly in that range within all of that. But also having these readers means that you don't have to spend an arm and a leg on buying different books. The course is going to focus on philosophy through the readings and discussions of some of history's greatest thinkers. Now, the problem with that is there's a lot of different ways that we could do this and approach it. We can do so chronologically, which in some level measure we are actually doing. We can also look at it thematically. We could be talking about how they're all approaching the same issue and kind of from different angles. We're not entirely doing that, but you do see how the themes kind of change within a sort of chronological measure. We can also talk about schools of thought. A new idea comes up and another one kind of takes its place. And this also kind of fits in a little bit while we're doing so chronologically, but doesn't fit entirely into that as well. So there's a lot of chaos that is wrapped up within all of that, and we have limited time. We can't go through everything. This is called Great Thinkers, and there's a number of great thinkers, and some of which you might be like, oh, I really want to know this person, and we don't have time to do that. I do have some other lectures that you can go ahead and find on YouTube and elsewhere if you're wanting to engage with some other thinkers, and some other great podcasts and other things I could recommend to you if you're like, hey, what about so and so? But for the nature of this course and our limited time, we have to limit things. And of course, who you cut is difficult. Certain things, they're in the course description, so we're going to talk about them. And so that kind of automatically makes that issue introduced. Now, the way we're bringing some order into this chaos is through a sort of balancing act. A little, the problem with any sort of introduction class is there's a lot of information, and in certain ways it's almost like drinking from a fire hose. You're going to end up getting, messed up while you're trying to take it all in, and so you try to just gather what you can. And so in my attempt to do this, this is where the Kierkegaard book comes in. In this book, Philosophical Fragments, and the subsequent work, Johannes Climacus, that are bound together, these are officially two separate works, but are treated together as one. Kierkegaard ends up introducing us to many of the great thinkers of philosophy. He's engaging with many different arguments, and my lectures on this are as me reading the text and highlighting, oh, here's a section where he's making a reference to Hegel or Descartes or to Hume or obviously to Plato or something else along those lines. So my job while you're watching those is to help bridge those connections, and in many ways that's what I'm hoping you will do throughout this course as well. I don't expect you to know everything by the end of the course. What I want you to do is to continue to learn and grow and to make connections. And so the advantage of doing the course this way is that you will learn a lot about a little. You will read all of the book by Kierkegaard here. You'll be able to keep it on your shelf and to be able to say, I have read this book. There is also the advantage that you're going to learn a little about a lot of different people. And so you end up getting this nice mix of the two combined within all of that. So you end up having this advantage going through. So who are we going to talk about throughout this course? Well, we're going to talk about many of the major philosophers that address. We're going to talk about Plato and Aristotle and Socrates. We're going to talk about Augustine, Aquinas, and Bonaventure and Anselm. We're going to talk about Hume and Kant and Hegel. We're going to talk about Neoplatonists and their place within this structure. We're going to talk about the empiricists. We're going to talk about the rationalists. We're going to talk about the pragmatists. We're going to talk about a lot of different people. And I advise all of you to just look through the Canvas modules and kind of scroll through, and you'll be able to see how all of this is going to be moved and understood. You're also going to see references both in lectures and other things to philosopher charts. I have a sort of default empty philosopher chart that I encourage all of you to fill out. This is something that will be ungraded. It's for your own benefit. But because we're talking about a lot of different people, if you end up filling these things out to the best of your ability, it'll help you sort of organize these different people a lot more, because sometimes it's hard to understand, okay, was this happen to be Epicurus or Marcus Aurelius that we talked about at the same day, or something else along those lines. You'll be able to kind of use as a reference guide. And so use those. Those won't be graded, but they are to your benefit, and that's why I kind of give you an empty one to be able to look through and have within all of that. The course is broken up really into three major sections. We're starting off with the foundations of Western philosophy. It is here that we are going to talk primarily about our ancient Greeks and then what happens after that, the scholastic period in the early Middle Ages. We're only briefly getting to introduce Kierkegaard and some of the readings near the end of that section. The second section of the course is our early modern period. It's here that we're roughly going from Descartes to Hegel and all of the discussions that happen to take place within all of that. And there's a lot that happens in the early modern period that then shapes later philosophy. With this, we're going to have a regular, sort of dosage of the Kierkegaard reading. Then the final section, we have modern philosophy. We have everything after Hegel. Really, we're getting into the 20th century. We're not getting that much into the, a little bit later. We're also getting those last several lectures a little more dominated by the Kierkegaard readings because now we've built this solid base that the later bit of readings will make more and more sense. So the course is broken up into these three major sections. Really want to point out too that most of the questions you have are in the syllabus. I give you a short syllabus and a schedule so you can kind of see when things are due and how all of that works. But most of the questions are not only just found in Canvas with the assignments of how is this supposed to look and how is it the paper should be formatted and everything else, but is found in the syllabus itself. Use that as a reference. I know it's long. There's a lot of things that need to be in there because it is information about a particular assignment, or the university wants sort of outcome statements or other sorts of statements that the university wants in there. So it's in there. Uh, but again, that just makes it longer. That's why I kind of give you a couple of different ways of approaching this so it doesn't just overwhelm you automatically. But look through the syllabus. One of the earliest assignments you have is a syllabus quiz that says you've read the syllabus and you understand both due dates and understanding of how this course is supposed to move and operate. And I've done a lot of work to try to make sure it's all there and accessible and that important things are even highlighted. This class is going to be done online. There's going to be discussion boards and other things along those lines. And I want to incentivize you all to be kind, be nice to one another. There will be some discussions with some things. There will be some ideas and some philosophers that you really like. There will be some that you don't. It's not your jam. It doesn't speak your language. It doesn't speak to you, or you don't understand why so and so is as important as they are. Rest assured, everyone we're talking about in this class is of great importance to many of the philosophers who come later. It's impossible to understand people like Descartes without understanding Aquinas and Bonaventure, because those were Descartes' philosophical heroes. It's impossible to understand them without understanding Augustine. It's rather difficult to understand Augustine if you don't understand Neoplatonism as well as Plato and Aristotle, although we'll talk about some of the basis that can kind of start within all of that. And so you can kind of see how these things build one on top of another. I'll also kind of talk about different tangents near the end of the class about people like Boethius and Photius who show us that there have always been different ways of doing that. But be kind with one another while you're looking through and discussing all of these things. Also, in your discussions and in your papers, this is all supposed to be you. You don't look to your other professor Google. Don't use any AI in this class. Use your information. The whole point is that I'm wanting you to make connections. So make those connections. That is the goal in this class, that you see it and make it and know it yourself. A sort of basis on the way that this course works is kind of built off of the model done at the University of Chicago. Years ago, when one got accepted to the University of Chicago, they got a letter of acceptance. And in this letter, there was a nice statement from the president at the time that said, "We don't do trigger warnings in safe spaces." And I don't either. One, nothing in this class should be so triggering to anybody, right? This is not overall a controversial class to many sort of respects. But beyond that, trigger warnings don't work. They usually trigger those who would be triggered early, and also then, as a sort of default, trigger those who wouldn't have been triggered. Also, the idea of a safe space is, on its very basis, something that doesn't work with university thinking. The idea in a university is that you're supposed to be challenged and grow. In a philosophy class, too, You need to give something of yourself over to wisdom. That costs you something. That costs you being comfortable in believing that you already know everything and that you're safe and comfortable with your presuppositions and assumptions about the way the world works. Sometimes those have to go away. Sometimes those might actually be reinforced. My goal in this class is not to change you all into little bots of me. My goal is to, again, help you to make connections and be able to see things and approach things in a way that is genuine and true for how you want to see that. Some people will be on one side of the social or political aisle, and someone will be on the other. And to me, that doesn't overall make much of a difference in the way this course is working. Are you making connections? Are you engaging the people in a way that is respectful and costs you something? That's what I want. So I can't do a safe space because I'm asking you from the very get-go to give something of yourself to this project. So do that. Almost anything is allowed as long as you kind of go back to that earlier discussion of being kind, right? Don't try to make universalized statements that shut down free thought. Don't tell somebody that their view is impossible because of where they happen to come from or their point of view. Everyone in this course has a right to speak their mind. Uh, Again, doing so respectfully is what's being asked for. And yes, we understand that you have your position and that you approach things from the light of your history and your tradition. But that doesn't make somebody else's views inherently invalid or not as true as yours. They might be wrong, they might be right. The idea is here we're trying to engage one another in the realm of ideas. And while we engage one another in the realm of ideas, I like this quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn in his Harvard speech in 1978. He was brought over, having been exiled from the Soviet Union after spending his earlier life in the gulags. And he comes to America, and Harvard asked him to speak. And he said, without any censorship in the West, fashionable trends of thoughts and ideas are carefully separated from those which are not fashionable. Nothing is forbidden, but what is not fashionable will hardly ever find its way into periodicals or books or be heard in colleges. Legally, your researches are free, but they are conditioned by the fashion of the day. So, what does this mean for us? Part of what it means to be a philosopher and a learner is to ask yourself some important questions. Important questions are not always fashionable. Sometimes you have to be unfashionable. Otherwise, it's groupthink and you're not actually thinking. Again, this doesn't mean that the basic presuppositions of society as it's operating today are inherently right or wrong. But the idea is to look down and to dig a little deeper and to say, why? And does this hold valid? Do the narratives that have kind of built up the way we're understanding the work, are those still true? Are those going to work? So with this in mind, in addition to the syllabus quiz, an early quiz you're going to take at the very beginning is what I call the course guidings principle quiz. I want you to understand that this is the way that the course is going to work and that this is what I expect of you and of one another. That we're not here just to do everything and just kind of check the box, but I want you to engage honestly and to give of yourself something to the thought of wisdom, and that's going to cost you something. But I also want you to do so in a respectful way with one another. And that, yes, I'm not going to give you trigger warnings, and yes, I'm not going to try to make this a safe space because fundamentally, that's not what I'm hoping for. The question that most of you have is, how am I going to get graded? And to this, really look into the syllabus. Fundamentally, there shouldn't be a lot of changes that takes place on this, but you're going to be graded in several different areas. You're going to be graded on a series of weekly assignments. There's going to be reading quizzes and lecture quizzes. There's going to be philosophical reflections, which really what the philosophical reflection is it's an opportunity for you to practice this philosophy. You're going to engage with these ideas and you're going to engage with one another after that. These are also a discussion forum where you need to post something and then respond back to another person's post later on in the week. Um, you're also going to have a series of exams over each of the sections and quizzes that lay things out. I also want all of you to complete course evaluations. It helps me adjust the course going forward, and it lets the university know what you've done within all of that. There is also going to be an office hours visit that is required by all of you. I want all of you at one point to meet with me. We're going to do this during the second section of the course, unless the syllabus will state otherwise, but that should be what's happening. And we're going to discuss at this point how things are going. It's about a 5-minute meeting. This class is entirely online, and oftentimes you might have a series of questions as they get developed and say, all right, how do I address this? Or what's the best way of going through that? And this is a great opportunity. You can meet me outside of the scheduled office hour time, but this is an opportunity that we all have to kind of touch base and make sure that we're doing well. There's also going to be a lot of assignments wrapped up with your paper. There's going to be a quiz and a thesis and the paper itself. And that's going to let me know how you're actually making these major connections in a way that these other more objective measures don't necessarily do. The course runs through two sorts of cycles of schedules. We've got three major sections: the foundations of Western philosophy, the early modern philosophy, and the modern philosophy. Each of these are 5-week sessions. I envision in my mind, just as this would be an in-person class, that there's two sort of sessions per week kind of wrapped up within all this. But you're more than happy, if you so wish, to move ahead. These are open, and you can always go back and make connections with them too. But there are these three, and exams kind of conclude each of these sections. Just a note too, the exams in session 2 does include some information from session 1, though most of it will be on session 2. And the exam in session 3 also includes some information from sessions 2 and sessions 1. On a weekly basis, you need to kind of understand the way that this weekly schedule works. I don't have anything due or expected on the weekend. The weekends I see as your time. If you want to do work on the weekends, that's great, but weekends are not when I'm expecting that you're going to be engaging with this material. The week runs Monday through Friday. Again, things are open earlier. You can always start something a little earlier if that needs to be, and work with that. Essentially, on Friday at 5 p.m., I don't do midnight due dates. 5 p.m. is the time that things are due, because then it's reasonable that I will look at it, and it's reasonable that you will have done. If 5 p.m. is too difficult for you, do it earlier. Again, things are open, and you can go ahead and start them earlier. Late work is not accepted on many of these lecture or reading quizzes or reflection and discussion forums. The reading and lecture quizzes are there to make sure essentially you've done the reading and you've watched the lectures, you've engaged with this material. They're very simple, open-ended, simple assignments, multiple choice, true, false, matching. No more than 5 questions on each of them, trying to just get a smattering of things in there. And they are due 5 p.m. on Fridays, each of those. So too is your initial post in the philosophical reflection. You can't see other people's until after you've made your first post. That first post is due by 5 p.m. on Friday. That following Wednesday, you need to respond to at least one of your fellowing students in the discussion board in there and say, okay, I've read your other thoughts, and this is an opportunity for you to learn from one another. So if you do both, then you'll get credit. My goal, as long as you're within the word range that I end up telling you and I see that you're engaged, you'll end up getting full credit for that. I'm not going to say, well, you're wrong with the way you're looking at this, therefore no credit. This is an opportunity for you to kind of practice and to be able to kind of play around with these ideas and sometimes even say things that might look a little bit off the wall, but by doing so, sometimes that lets you, again, have unfashionable thoughts that help unstiffen all of your other ways of thinking. The recorded lectures, as you watch them throughout that, are typically speaking about 2.5 hours worth. Just as if this was an in-person class where we had two 75-minute sessions, that'd be 2.5 hours. Anywhere between 2.5 and 3 hours is kind of seen as this normal standard operation within all of that. I'll expect with doing the reading and other work involved in there that that'll take you an extra maybe hour, an hour and a half within a week to do those readings and to be engaged with those. Take all of the notes that you want. The exams are entirely open note. I hope that you'll have your book marked up and your readings marked up in there and you have everything with you. But yes, the week runs Monday through Friday. I'll respond to emails and discussions throughout that time and engage within all of that. The major assignment in this class is your paper. In the paper, what you're going to do is you're going to talk about one idea. Again, my goal in this class is that you make connections. I don't expect that you know everything, but I do expect that you're able to have an idea that resonates with you. And this idea and what I'm wanting you to do in the paper is something that you're going to find in the Kierkegaard book. There's, in Philosophical Fragments, lots and lots of different ideas mentioned. Out there, you can kind of see in the slide, and you can find on the assignment, you can find it in the syllabus. There's 15 ideas of what the paper could be about. And you can pick any of those, you can pick none of those, you can come up with your own. There's a lot of really great ideas that are outside of what those are. And the idea is that it's one idea between Kierkegaard and one other philosopher that we've encountered throughout this class. So it might be that you really liked the reading with Hegel and you understood his idea and you really want to connect that idea with something in the Kierkegaard book. That's great, do that. What you're not going to do is connect it with Hegel and Kant and anyone else, right? So it's going to be one person and Kierkegaard. And it's going to be one idea. And it's going to be 5 to 8 pages. And if you have further questions about it, this is what the office hours are also for. This is an opportunity for you to be like, okay, I think I've got this worked out. Let me look at it and understand it. The paper should be 5 to 8 pages, Chicago style, Times New Roman, double space, footnotes for all of your citations. No outside research is necessary, though, or required, or even actually accepted. Um, the readings that I've given you have enough for you to do this paper. You can use all of the Kierkegaard book, and you could use all of the readings of any one of the philosophers that we're talking about that you engage with. The caveat I give with the no outside research is accepted is if you end up reading something and you're like, can I do the larger section? Because I know Kant in this other part of this same reading goes into this more. The answer is yes, you can do that. Most of those readings have a place where I got them from a URL, assuming it's still live. You can find that reading online. And if you wanted the larger reading instead of the one that I edited down for space to be able to make your argument, you're more than happy to do so. But otherwise, I don't want you going and doing outside research. I don't care what another philosopher, as brilliant as they might be, thinks about this topic or this idea. I care what you think. Again, the idea is to see the connections you're making. And so here's the material. Tell me what you see. Tell me the connections. As a general outline, the first paragraph should be the thesis. In this paper, I plan on arguing X and Y. Then you should have 2 block paragraphs, and it doesn't really matter which order, but one of, philosopher X happens to say X on the topic, philosopher Kierkegaard says Y on this topic, as 2 sort of large sort of blocks of paragraphs. Then the next sort of third or half of the paper even is you comparing and contrasting this. Since it's the same idea, how does Kierkegaard see this different than Socrates as you're teasing this out? How does this look? Or, whichever philosopher that happens to be. And then a sort of concluding paragraph or 2 paragraphs or whatever it happens to be, where you're kind of laying out your opinion. It's also totally justifiable and okay. You know what? If you want to say, I happen to particularly like Kierkegaard's treatment of this. I don't like, whoever else is, or I like the other guys better. You know what? I think Plato's got a stronger idea than what Kierkegaard has. That's totally fine too. right? Your opinion is valid in this paper. I is okay to mention in this paper. It is not a research paper as it is an engagement paper. And so while you might have shorter reflections you're doing, this is you making the big connections. And so absolutely it's okay for you to mention your views and your opinions in there. But probably do so as a sort of conclusion with the last paragraph or maybe quarter of the paper, depending on how you divide it up. But this is how it should be and how it should be presented. So I look forward to you and engaging with you over this course. I'm sure you still have a number of questions. Again, first look over the syllabus, look through Canvas and the modules that are provided. But otherwise, go ahead and email me. Shoot me an email and ask me a question. I do the best I can to respond to all of them. If it's something that needs a response, I will give you a response, even if it's just a yes, no, or something else along those lines. And if I don't send you a response, make sure that you sent me the right email, right? As a university email, my email address is slightly different than yours, and I do have numbers after my email address, which, while not ideal, do need to be the right ones and be put in there. So if you don't get a response, make sure that you check that out. Pay attention to Canvas and the announcements. That's one of the ways that I'm going to talk to everyone in the class with a sort of big answer to things that might answer your questions as things are going by. I am also more than happy to set up a time where we can have an online meeting, or if you happen to be on campus, you can go ahead and swing by my office during my office hours if I'm there, and I'm happy to talk to you then too. And that might be easier for some of you. But again, some of you might not be anywhere near campus and might not be able to do so. So again, questions, I'm more than happy to help answer them and do the best we can with that. Again, look forward to this semester, look forward to engaging with you and seeing how we all can learn through this process together.